So when you are in a right relationship with God, then you do it from your heart. And your conscience wouldn't prick. Conscience is the place where God gives us this understanding that something is wrong. So Israel as a whole was chosen in place of Adam or humanity. This is how the narrative progresses. So as I said, first it is God created Adam and Eve, and then God, who is love, he wanted them to reflect this love into this world, love his creation, take care, steward his creation. And then God has promised them life, and they were living that eternal life with joy and delight. They lost the relationship because they disobeyed God, and they died, or they became vulnerable to death. Death was not there in humanity until then. Now people get sick, people die, their bodies decay after they were deceived by the devil in the garden. All these deeds, these death, destruction, decay have come because of the devil who deceived them. Now God is going to reverse this. The goal is to reverse death. Death can be reversed only if some human rises from the dead and he reverses everything else. Death came because people sinned against God. People did something wrong. In this mutual good relationship, in the right relationship, people did something that made the relationship sour, relationship separated, or relationship wrong. The relationship went wrong. So when the relationship went wrong, God became human. And this is the thing that we see of Christ. But before God became a human, God pursued these humans like Abraham and Moses, and God laid down to them the same framework. So it was supposed to work in this way, because God already had given them something called the Torah, which contained the promise of life, and the promise of life would be revealed when Jesus would come. It was supposed to be in this manner. It is not something like, okay, God's project failed, so God tried, and many other projects failed, and eventually God succeeded. That is how I thought of it before. But eventually I came to this understanding that this is how it was meant to be. That is why the Bible says at the fulfillment of time, which means when the right time came, or until that right time, things were going on in this particular manner as they were supposed to go on. And then at that particular time, when God had to reveal Christ, Christ came. So Abraham and his family, which is Israel basically, were also supposed to do the same thing, which is the Adamic human vocation. They were also supposed to reflect God. They were also supposed to love God, God who is love, created people in his image of love for the purpose of, that is, to love. And he gave them the command, love. And the same thing, that command is the Torah, which I mentioned before, which contains those 10 commandments, the Decalogue. Now, that command was given so that people would have a right relationship with God and right relationship with each other. Only if you have a right relationship with one another, you can actually have a right relationship with God according to that setup. And if you have a right relationship with God, you would seek to have right relationship with others. You would not want to hurt them. And if you hurt them, you seek forgiveness. You get forgiveness. If they don't forgive you, that is their problem. But the thing is, you always want to be in right relationship with God from your heart. It is not something to show off. Now, this whole thing became a show off eventually. How did it become a show off? They understood this is about a right relationship, this covenant. But because these people broke the covenant many times by doing idol worship, when they did idol worship, they broke the entire God side of the command. And when they did injustice to each other, injustice was delivered by judges. Injustice was delivered in the name of justice. That is the level to which Israel eventually, denigrated, or whatever that word is. They fell so badly that they were dispensing injustice as justice through their appointed right judges. And they thought that what they did was right. That is the level of blindness that they had. That's why Jesus, when he was critical of these people, he said to them, you are blind guides. You will fall in pit, and you will lead others, and they will also fall into a pit. He said that you have a log in your eye. You cannot even see your standards, your benchmarks, your standards that you are setting for others themselves are completely wrong. You are setting wrong standards. You are demanding something that God is not telling you to do. And you have a log in your eyes, and you judge others for having a speck in their eyes, and with a log you cannot see. A blind person trying to get something out of somebody else's eyes. Think about it. And he said, if your light itself is dark, or if you call darkness light and light darkness, if your light itself is darkness, how great, how deep, how profound is your darkness? The problem was their heart was not there in the right place. They were dispensing injustice in the name of justice. And God was so angry, God's presence left them, and God handed them over into the hands of other communities to rule over them, idols, idol worshippers, and they were scattered in different parts of the world. And eventually they realized that they had sinned against God, and the covenant is broken. And they realized that because the covenant is broken, just like the rest of the humanity, they are not in a right relationship with God, and they need to get right with God. And then they started several attempts, and these attempts were what the Pharisees and everybody else was doing. They were making the law stronger, and they were doing moral policing on others, but they took it completely out of its original intention, to such an extent that Sabbath, that was supposed to bring rest to people, itself became a cause for their restlessness. On a Sabbath, people were supposed to rest because they need to get rest to their bodies, and they extended that Sabbath law to include so many other things to such an extent that it became a burdensome thing to people. Like on a Sabbath, if your donkey falls, or if your ox falls, you shouldn't take it up from the pit where it is. You can light a fire, but you should not turn it off. You should not even come for a healing miracle to the synagogue on a Sabbath day. If you expect a healing miracle, you can go to that particular healer at any other time of the week, not on the Sabbath day. So healing is something that would bring rest to that person. And donkeys and oxen and everything else was supposed to get rest on a Sabbath. But because of their carelessness, negligence, and because of their selfishness, they made these laws, they bent these laws in such a way that these laws themselves, which were supposed to bring rest, became a source of restlessness. For instance, the disciples of Jesus, they ate a little grain on a Sabbath day. It was supposed to bring some rest to their body, some rest to their stomachs, which are hurting because of hunger. But these people, their interpretation of the Sabbath was, you should not harvest grain on Sabbath. And these people have harvested. They took a little bit for themselves. And Jesus was so critical of them. Jesus said that, see, if you knew that I am the real high priest and these people are my fellow priests, you would not bring this accusation at all. Because your priests, they eat bread, not just grain. They eat baked bread inside your temples on a Sabbath day. So Jesus had to say that because Jesus understood that their intention is not right. Their heart is not right. They are not sincere toward God. They just wanted to find fault with Jesus' disciples and say something against them and against Jesus' ministry. So the point here is, of course, they started with a lot of zeal to be very holy in God's sight, so that God would restore their relationship with them. God would come back, His presence would come back, the exile would come to an end, and people, the Israelites, would have a good relationship with God, would be showing mutual faithfulness and reflecting God, and then God's presence would come, and their King, the Messiah, will reign over the whole world. That is what these people were hoping for. And whatever forces had enslaved them, tyrants, all those oppressive forces would go away. But in that zeal, what they did was they made life difficult for weaker people, like the people who were Jesus' disciples, who were poor people, and the people like those tax collectors and sinners. Just to cut them off from the scroll, they would say, you are a tax collector, but we cannot get you out of the scroll because you are a tax collector, but you eat with the Roman pagan people. They are idol worshippers. They have given this food over to idols. Therefore, when you eat this food that is sacrificed to idols, you are also becoming an idol worshipper, because you are eating with them their food. So now you are an idol worshipper. Because you are an idol worshipper, you have broken the command of God, and therefore you are out of our synagogue, you are out of the age to come, your life will be cut off from the book of life that we keep. So that was the level of their hypocrisy. These people have not even done any idol worship, but they are out of the synagogue because they have this particular profession that they have chosen, which would give them a lot of money. But these people, they have chosen it because they are not getting fair or equal treatment from the richer class within their community. They have chosen this profession so that they could live those kind of luxurious lives. And they don't care whether their names are there in the book of life or not. They don't care how they are gaining their wealth. They want to live the same standard of living as the other people were living. But these Pharisees and lawyers, in order to have control over these people and over their community, and to moral police them, and to perhaps make their community very, very pious in the sight of God, so that God's presence would come down and Messiah would come down, they were doing all these kind of things. They were extending the law beyond its original scope. That is why Jesus said that you should not add anything or subtract anything from the law. It is forbidden. I have not come to add something or subtract something, but you are doing it. And then Jesus said that if I were to extend the other side of the law and say to you that just by looking at a woman lustfully you have committed adultery with her, and just by being angry and calling somebody a fool you have committed their murder, how would it sound to you? Would you be able to bear it? You have extended one side of the law and made it unbearable for people. If I were to extend the other side of the law, would it become bearable? And these people, their consciences were pricked. That is what happened when Jesus preached the Sermon on the Mount. So Jesus basically was correcting these people's overcorrection. They did an overcorrection, and Jesus was correcting their overcorrection, and he was telling them that, say, whatever command is already there in the book, that much is enough. You don't need to extend it. Some people, they take that take those hyperboles of Jesus in today's world, they take it out of its original context. Why Jesus said these hyperboles was not for literal obedience. It was given so that the consciences of these people would be pricked, so that they would understand that they need to show mercy to those sinners who are adulterers basically, and those greedy tax collectors whom they were calling murderers because they were associated with Rome, who was over them and controlling them and causing them pain. So Jesus actually wanted to prick their conscience, but these people, these individuals today, people of this kind, what they do is they take those things literally, and then they prick the conscience of the poor